Well, this is a comparison that I did not see coming. A Porsche 911 that can go off-road and a supercar beating Hyundai electric car. Now, I just want to point something out here. This isn't going to be your regular head-to-head comparison where we really put these two together spec for spec. I'm not exactly sure how many people will actually be cross-shopping between these two vehicles, but they're two very, very special cars. And I think in a world where we're complaining about medium-sized SUVs, boring electric cars, and all of that sort of thing, it's nice to remember that car companies are going out on a limb and building some really bonkers, mad, mental things that are worth celebrating, I think. So today we've got the Porsche 911 Dakar, a regular Porsche 911 that claims to go off-road, and I mean properly off-road. And on this side we've got a Hyundai Ioniq 5N. That's got up to 478 kilowatts of power. Both of these mid 3 seconds, 0 to 100, something like that. Serious performance machines. So they're two very different cars, but I think they both share the same spirit of being a little bit mad. And today in this video, we're going to run you through everything you need to know about the Porsche 911 Dakar and the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. We're going to run through the interiors, the spec, the tech, all of that sort of thing. And of course, we're going to take them for a drive. And right at the end, I've got a very special treat in this car in particular. I might even take it fishing. Porsche 911 Dakar is a limited run special edition for the brand, with 2,500 being made globally and only 15 destined for Australia. It's a homage to Porsche's famous 1984 win of the Paris-Dakar Rally, where a Porsche 953, which is essentially a modified version of the Porsche 911 with 4-driven wheels and off-road suspension, won the car class outright. And 40 years later, Porsche is reviving this heritage with a special edition model. It's based upon a 911 Carrera 4 GTS, but there is a range of modifications here that are aimed at improving the off-road credentials of the 911. Firstly, springs and dampers have been replaced, and there's a 50mm increase in ride height over a regular 911. And there's also a hydraulic lift system front and rear, so that gives you an additional 30mm for a total of an 80mm lift. Those catchy white wheels are wrapped in specific Pirelli Scorpion all-terrain tyres. There's loads of bash plates underneath and recovery points at both ends. The engine is a 3-litre twin-turbocharged petrol flat 6, which makes 353 kilowatts and 570 newton meters. It runs through an 8-speed PDK automatic transmission to all 4 wheels. Claimed acceleration times for this 911 Dakar from 0 to 100 is a sprightly 3.4 seconds. Other bits worth talking about for this 911 Dakar includes rear steering, electromechanical anti-roll bars and upgraded engine mounts from a 911 GT3. The rear spoiler and the front lid are both made out of carbon fiber reinforced plastics, and you'll also notice those GT3 style nostrils up front. The seats, the battery and the glass in this car have all been on a diet, and it culminates in a curb weight of 1,605 kilos, which is impressively only 10 kilos heavier than a Carrera 4 GTS. The roof racks have a 42 kilo load capacity, and the front storage area can fit a fairly decent 132 litres. Porsche also quotes 264 litres of space behind the front seats, but that is hampered in our case by this optional steel roll cage. Now let's talk price. This Porsche 911 Dakar is priced from $491,000 before on-road costs and options. And this Rothmans inspired paint which we have here, well, that adds about $54,000 to the asking price. But that's all elementary, because out of the 2,500 made globally, they've already all been accounted for. The Hyundai Ioniq 5N is a new, fully electric performance hero for the Korean brand. Take a regular Ioniq 5, but firstly, we're going to swap out the electric motors, and now we've got outputs of 440 kilowatts and 740 newton meters, or you can get a brief burst of 478 kilowatts and 770 newton meters, and that goes to all 4 wheels. The battery here is different, with a more dense 84 kilowatt hours of capacity, and there's loads of additional cooling and thermal management for the batteries and electric motors. Steering has been overhauled in the Ioniq 5N. Rear suspension has been heavily modified, and the front suspension, well, that is all new. The body structure has been stiffened considerably as well for the performance orientation of this model. In terms of braking, there is an industry-leading 0.6 G of regenerative braking ability here, and that's backed up by huge steel 400mm front and 360mm rear brakes. And the car touches the ground via 275 wide Pirelli tyres at all four corners. There's a claimed 0 to 100 km/h sprint time of 3.4 seconds. That's impressive, and it also happens to match the 911 Dakar in this comparison. But I think the real appeal of this Ioniq 5N comes from the intensive and immersive driving modes and the level of customization available. You can mimic internal combustion engines and dual clutch gearboxes in this car with impressive results, and you can make wholesale changes to things like suspension, driveline, and overall calibration. Hell, you can even go full front wheel drive or fully rear wheel drive if you so desire. Otherwise, the level of packaging and space overall is the same as a regular Ioniq 5. And don't let that retro hatchback silhouette fool you. This is a fairly commodious car. It's similar to what you'd expect out of a medium-sized SUV in terms of space. Plus, the boot is quite decent as well. You've got 480 litres of space in the back here with the rear seats in place. So what makes a 911 actually a Dakar? It's not just this paint, by the way. This is actually an optional extra. You're looking at around $50,000, a little bit more actually to option this. It's inspired by Porsche's 1984 win of the Paris Dakar many, many years ago. But I've got to say, it gets a lot of looks around town and it looks great, I think. But the more important thing to talk about, I think, wheels and tyres. So we've got 20-inch wheels at the back here, 19s at the front. They're painted white. They look quite standout, I think. And of course, we've got Pirelli Scorpion all-terrain tyres here. This is a 295 tyre at the back, really, really wide. It's a narrower tyre up the front there, but we're going to see how this goes off-road a little bit later. But of course, we're going to drive it on-road as well to see if this car actually stands up in both ways. Now, this suspension, it's the same setup as you would get in a regular 911, but it's been lifted, so it's got different springs, different shock absorbers, and we've also got a hydraulic lift system. So we can go up 50 mils in the standard point, and then we can go another 30 mils in the off-road driving modes as well for extra clearance. Extra clearance comes as well from up here. So we've got a different front setup here. This is designed for better ground clearance. Obviously, we've got a front recovery point there. That's forged aluminium actually. There's one at the back as well. We've got a different bonnet to the car this is based on. So this is a GT3 bonnet. We've got some ducting here. This is carbon fiber reinforced, really nice looking bit of gear. And the cooling system has changed as well. So we've got radiators on both sides now instead of having one more centrally located and a little bit more prone to damage off-road. There's a bunch of protection underneath there. But that is about it. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but there's a lot of technology in terms of traction control, driving modes and that sort of thing that's meant to make this car much better off-road. We're going to find out exactly how much better it is. Well, it's based upon the Ioniq 5, but this car does look very different in its application. And some people on social media have been commenting that they don't like the way it looks for some reason. I've got to disagree. I reckon this thing looks great. You've got a lower car, you've got a wider car, and you've got this gloss black body kit going on with red highlights everywhere. And I think it really accentuates the Ioniq 5, which is in its own, I think, a really good looking car. Super modern, super techy, which is exactly what this is. We've got 21-inch forged alloy wheels all round, and they are all 275 wide, 275 millimeters. That's a lot of tire. That means a lot of grip. We're going to see how this thing drives a little bit later. But what you can't see in this case is what's lying underneath the bodywork. And that's the really important part of this Ioniq 5N. It's got high-powered motors front and rear. They have been braced. They have extra cooling. There's been a lot more stiffening of the body, a lot more rigidity going on. The suspension has been overhauled front and rear as well to suit the performance idea of this car. I'm really keen to see what it's like on a bit more of a drive. Let's go. Here's the interior of the 911 Dakar, and it's a really special place to be. You've got a bit of a rough and tumble exterior on this car, but the interior has lots of nice materials going on, although a lot of them are part of option packs, so keep that in mind. But I think the way it looks, the way it feels, the build quality and the fit and finish and that sort of thing, it's all in keeping, I think, with what you would expect of a car with that badge on the front, but also of this price. It looks good, it feels good, and there's just great attention to detail around so many parts of this car. Of course, you've got the Dakar badge here. This is number 2176 of 2,500. Such a limited run of this vehicle, and part of why it feels so special, I think. But in terms of practicalities, if you're going to be daily driving this thing, not sure how many people will, but you do have a cup holder here, which is handy for the driver. You can actually pop that out if you want and put something else in there. And there's also an extra cup holder in front of the passenger there. So that's pretty good. There's a decent sized glove box. Otherwise, storage includes a small bin here in the center console. That's good for your phone. There's 2 USB-C power outlets there. I've got my cable in there at the moment, but that is otherwise about it. Because we've got some options fitted here, there's actually a roll cage in the back along with these really fancy seats. I'll talk about this cage first. I mean, cages are cool. They're very awesome to look at, and it makes the car look tough, but it does sort of render this rear space inaccessible. So if you didn't have that, you'd actually have a fair amount of room in the back there for some extra bags and that sort of thing if you wanted to go away for the weekend, something like that. But now with this, I don't know, I get it if you want a cage, that's awesome, but it kind of ruins the sort of that extra little edge of practicality. And my other question is, how do you get in there to clean the inside of that back window? You'll have to send a little kid in maybe, or use a long stick to get in there. I'm not sure how you would actually do that, but maybe that's not a big deal for most people buying this car. Infotainment is nice. It's got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, really nice operating system. That's really nice. And of course, you've got a digital cluster in front here. A nice big analog tacho, pride of place in the middle there, but then you've got these screens on the outside that can adjust tire pressures, speed, maps, a lot of things going on there, and it just looks great. The steering wheel is beautiful as well. It's a little bit understated in here, but it's really nice and I love it. Your only other storage bits are 2 little bins in the doors here, which, I mean, Porsche probably didn't need to put in there, but it is quite handy. You could fit your phone in there, a purse or something like that. It's a nice little detail that makes this thing just a little bit more usable in the everyday. Now you can option a more regular, more adjustable and probably more comfortable seat in this 911 Dakar, but we've got these bad boys in here. They are a fixed bucket seat. They're very hugging. That makes it a little bit difficult to get into and out of the car, but they are beautiful. It's got carbon fiber in there and they're actually reasonably comfortable, I think. They come with a harness, which is uncomfortable to sit on, but you can use this gap here in the seat to push the big buckle down in the bottom there and just use your regular seatbelt for regular driving. And man, I have to say, the way that these seats hold you in around corners is really, really nice and adds to the confidence, I think, of when you are driving this car pretty hard. You feel really nice and centered and you can focus on what you're doing. So what do you get on the inside of a $110,000 plus on-road Hyundai? In some senses, you do get a fair bit, and there's a lot of nice materials going on here, and similar to the regular Ioniq 5, there's plenty of space and comfort as well. This center console setup is different to the regular unit. It doesn't move around as much, but you get a wireless charging pad there, 2 USB points. There's actually a third one here on the back, plus a 12-volt plug. And then you've got a big old storage bay down here with these cup holders that pop in and out, and room for a fair amount of stuff actually. So in terms of storage, you're pretty well sorted. The center console is reasonably small, but you've got this space in front here, so that's all right, I think. The seats are, I think, the same as what you get in an i30N, so they're a fairly sporty bucket seat. You only get manual adjustment, you don't get electric adjustment, and Hyundai told us they did that to lower the seating position to make it feel a little bit more sporty as a driver's car. You do get heating and ventilation though, and this little N badge here does light up in the dark when you turn the car on, which is pretty cool. They look and they feel good. They're definitely a sporty seat. Infotainment, that is the same as what you get elsewhere. This is a pretty good setup, I think. It's a 12.3 inch system, and you've got Apple CarPlay, you've got Android Auto, you've got a lot of stuff going on, especially with this N model. And to be honest with you, I could probably sit here for about 40 minutes and try and talk to you about all of the different functions you've got in this Ioniq N in terms of the driving modes, all the customization that goes on, all of the meters and gauges, the battery technology. There is a whole lot. So a lot of the functionality comes from the buttons on the steering wheel, and I'll just go clockwise here, starting with this red button. That is NGB, that is N-Grin Boost. That gives you a big power boost of about 30 kilowatts and 30 Newton meters for 10 seconds, and then gives you a 10-second cooldown afterwards. Pretty cool thing to have. And then you've got further down here, this is NE Shift. You don't know that until you press it, but that is where the car starts to simulate internal combustion. It changes the way the car drives, and it genuinely feels like an internal combustion car. I was super skeptical of this feature. I thought it'd be rubbish, but I actually love it. It improves the driving experience of this car. Now going around to this next one here, this is the N driving mode. So this is, I suppose it's sports, but going to the next level. You've got a couple of custom driving modes there you can choose as well. And then up here is your regular driving mode. So there is eco, there is normal, and then there is sport. So I guess 1, 2, 3, and then 4 down here. And then you can start to customize all these different things. Torque distribution, the dampers, the steering, the sound. There is just so much to get through in this car. I won't do it justice if I sit here right now, but we do have a story on the website on Drive.com.au that runs through all of these things. So if you want all of the details, I'll suggest you head over there. There's a digital instrument cluster in front of the driver. That's not too bad. You don't have a huge amount of functionality going on there, but it does give you the readout of the blind spot view monitor when you're driving, which is really handy when you're driving in traffic. And then you've got a little bit of extra storage in the doors as well, and a big long kind of door handle that works pretty well. And I mean, I did say that the materials are nice in this car, but that's probably limited more to the seats and the steering wheel, to be honest with you. There are some harder plastics around the place. Build quality does feel good. I mean, this is a $110,000 Hyundai, so you might expect a fully luxury experience. It's nice, I think. It's not what I would call salubrious, but it does feel well made, and I think it presents well also. And I guess this is more of a driver's car than a car to sit in and survey the surroundings. Here's the second row of the Ioniq 5N, and it's a bit of a surprise. Well, probably it's not a surprise because this is the same as a regular Ioniq 5 in terms of space and packaging, and this is surprisingly pretty good as a family car in my opinion. That's my driving position up front there. I'm a little bit under 6 foot tall, and in terms of legroom, as you can see, there is a lot of space going on. Not a whole lot of toe room, I guess, but this footwell is nice and flat and wide, so that's not as much of an issue, I think. Headroom is pretty good, and these seats are reasonably comfortable. You can see my thighs are off the seat a little bit there because we've got a lot of batteries and things underneath us, but it's not too bad, I think, in terms of comfort overall. We've got air vents here in the B pillars. We've got USB-C power outlets there. And the interesting thing is that we've got a sliding function here in the second row. It's got a 60-40 split, which is handy, I suppose, but normally this is for cars when there's a third row. You've got it here, so you can slide this forward if you want. You can probably tilt the backrest back a little bit if you wanted to have a snooze. Put that up as well while you're at it. That's not too bad, actually. And I can tell you that in this car, I have fit 3 child seats into the back. So there's pretty good space. And despite this thing is a performance car with over 600 horsepower, it does work as a family vehicle, which is a pretty interesting mix. There is room for bottles in the doors. You've got that same sort of long door handle style thing as you have up front there. And when you've got only 2 in the back, you do have a pop-down armrest with cup holders. Aside the fact that my knees are relatively high here, this does feel pretty good. Driving this 911 Dakar is a really interesting experience. You might expect, because of the raised suspension, the different damping and that sort of thing, and especially these tyres, these Pirelli all-terrain tyres, that it might lose a lot of that poise and composure that 911s are so renowned for. I've got to say, this feels still, on the blacktop, really, really good. Yes, there's probably a little bit more squirm going on, maybe a little bit more body roll and that sort of thing, but I've spent some time driving some really twisty roads around the place, and man, this thing, it's great fun. But the ride comfort of this 911 Dakar is impressive as well. It's nowhere near as terse as a lot of supercars can be, and you've got adaptive damping there, so you can dial it down a little bit. If you're cruising around town through the suburbs like I am now, this is perfectly comfortable. It's pretty quiet as well. I mean, you've got that beautiful engine noise, but I would never want that to be quietened down. This car, I mean, we haven't driven it off-road yet. We're going to see how that goes, but on-road, this car really still delivers as an enjoyable, capable sports car. Hear that noise? Driving an electric car, but it's making petrol noises. And it's a really funny thing about this car actually, because I love internal combustion. I love electric as well, but I mean, one trying to mimic the other just doesn't seem like a good idea. It's never going to really fully replicate it. And I think it's, you know, you just see it as being a bit of a gimmick, I suppose. But I was wrong about that, because this car is better for having this mode here and E-shift. And there's a lot to dig through with this car in terms of all the different driving modes and that sort of thing. But having an E-shift here, but also having the ability to go into N or custom 1, gets a bit noisier, gets a bit more raucous, really stiffens up the steering and the suspension as well. So this car becomes a proper little driver's car. I mean, it's not that little and it's not that light either, but it drives better than any 2.2 ton car should be allowed to. Now, the reason it does that is because it's got a really well engineered chassis. There's got a lot of differences underneath in comparison to a regular Ioniq 5, but it's also got a whole lot of electronic control as well. And when you're driving twisty roads like these ones, it just feels like it wants to turn through corners really cleanly. The steering feels good, it's enjoyable, it's responsive, and it even has a really strong rear-wheel drive bias, so it starts to squirm around underneath you when you start to push it. And this is things that you don't normally get in an electric car. And yes, $110,000 is a lot of money, but if you find the right bit of road where it's legal, you can go from 0 to 100 in a very, very quick time. This thing is outrageously quick. So yes, it's expensive in terms of being a Hyundai. In terms of performance, this is actually a reasonable value offering, because 470 kilowatts, 0 to 100 in the mid threes, but it also combines that in a package that is fun to drive beyond that. So you're not just taking off at the set of lights and saying, oh, wasn't that fun? You're actually seeking out some good roads in this car. You're looking for the back roads and you're savoring them and enjoying them. And I really take my hat off to this car, because it's done for me what no other electric car has done yet, and it's made a true enthusiast car. Yes, it comes at a price. That's the cost of electric powertrains these days. Maybe it'll come down in the future, maybe it won't, but I've got to say, this car, it is special. Now, I said at the start of this video, it's not really a comparison between this or the 911 Dakar. I think if you had either, you've got a great vehicle. One is highly expensive, highly collectible, a supercar. This is a raucous supercar killer, which is kind of like a modern day hot hatch that's just a bit bigger. It actually fits a fair bit in the back as well. But regardless, if you pick either car, if you're lucky enough to have either of these vehicles, I think you'll have something quite special. But there's one thing that this car cannot do that the Porsche can, and that's go off-road. So let's see how that goes. We're on the sand. Let's take this 911 Dakar for a drive and see if we don't get bogged. I'm in off-road mode. I've got it selected there. I'm going to put this in manual as well through the PDK and take off. Oh, plenty of wheel spin there, but we are off. This beach is actually really chopped up. It's one of the more popular driving beaches around the place. So there's plenty of wheel tracks everywhere. I've got to say, this car is actually pretty good. I've got a decent baseline, I think, in terms of how a four-wheel drive would normally perform on sand like this. And this beach in particular, I've driven it a few times before. This thing, I've got to say, it's not far off the mark. I mean, ground clearance is a bit limited. It doesn't got the suspension travel as well, so you do tend to bounce around on the dunes a little bit and these washouts and ruts and wheel tracks, but listen to that engine. Man, this is awesome. It's maintaining progress really well, but I think the off-road traction control system here is the real star. It's a bit of an unsung hero, I think, but you can see the system blipping away there on the dashboard from time to time, and it's controlling your throttle inputs, it's controlling where the torque is going, but it's doing a stellar job. I mean, this thing, I can't believe I'm driving on a 911 on the beach and I'm doing really well. I think we all saw that Maserati Levante that got stuck on the beach and was on the bulletin news, but I don't think that's going to happen to us. I feel really confident driving this thing on the beach. It's working well. Hats off. This thing definitely does walk the walk. Oh my God. Staying the wheel ruts here. I can hear that underbody bash plate getting a bit of a workout there. Sounds up on the windscreen. Keep the foot in. This is phenomenal. What a hilarious car. God, it's got some power. You can maintain momentum so easily. I mean, you've got this beautiful 6-cylinder engine there. It responds nicely, but that traction control system really does great work in terms of making sure it's not useless wheel spin. Puts it down onto the ground quite nicely. Oh, man. This thing's amazing. If you asked me if it was possible, if you could go beach fishing out of a Porsche 911 a few years ago, I would have told you that you were mad, but we've proven today that it's quite possible. Actually, it's not even just possible, it's really easily doable. This 911 is really good off-road. It's not just a sticker pack, it's not just the tires, it's not just the wheels. This car is genuinely capable off-road, and I'm amazed how good it is. But at the same time, it's a Porsche 911 on-road as well. Sure, these tires might give up a bit of grip through the corners, but the noise, the feel, the experience, this is a phenomenal car. Now, 2,500 of these cars are made globally. They're all sold. And I don't know if anyone's actually going to be doing what I'm doing here with this one, but rest assured that they can if they want. This car, wow, it's amazing. Now, I hope you have enjoyed this video as much as I have making it. This has been, well, to be honest with you, it's been pretty scary to commit to taking this thing onto the beach, but thankfully it has done really, really well. Give us a thumbs up if you have enjoyed the video. Drop a comment in there as well. If you want to see the full story, head to Drive.com.au. As always, thanks for watching. I'm going to see if I can actually catch a fish.